So as you can see today, I got my Chuco top on in memory of my mentor. He usually wore an East LA style hat as seen in the thumbnail or a baseball cap of some sort. I was first introduced to the man I'm about to speak on by Frank Paco Marcel. Paco knew that I had previously worked in the California Department of Corrections at Folsom Prison and that I was very interested in California prison gangs as I had worked them for many years. Paco was a pioneer with the National Major Gang Task Force, the New Mexico Gang Investigators Association, the Arizona Gang Investigators Association, and the California Prison Gang Task Force. And he told me, "Hey, Gabe, there's somebody I'd like you to meet." He was the founder of the California Prison Gang Task Force, first called the Monterey Park Prison Gang Task Force. And he was one of the very first guys to track La M, the Mexican Mafia. Paco was one of our first advisors to the International Latino Gang Investigators Association, of which I was the founder and first president of. The association started informally in 1998 as the Latino Gangs List Spot, and as we gained more and more momentum and popularity, we had individuals on that intel list from all over the United States and even on an international basis. We became incorporated in 2002, and we had our first conference in the city of Seattle when I was working at the King County Jail in classification. As my previous video mentioned, was the section in charge of documenting all security threat groups in the greater Seattle area. It was at this conference that I first met Robert Moco Morel in person at my house in the greater Seattle area. And ILGIA gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award at the conference. We had spoken previously on the phone a few times, and he once told me about a time when he was on the Prison Gang Task Force, and he and his partner went down to Baja, Mexico, and tracked down MA shot caller Benjamin Topo Peters. He said they came up with a phony extradition warrant and told the Mexican police that the governor wants this guy real bad, and flashed the fake warrant briefly. The police handed Topo Peters over to Moco and his partner, and they threw Topo in the trunk, then headed to the Mexican-U.S. border, whereby customs agents asked them if they had anything to declare. Topo was still cursing about his arrest and kicking in the trunk as the car was going back and forth. Moco and his partner flashed their badges, and with a wink and a nod, they were on their way. They transported Topo to the L.A. County Jail. Topo actually was wanted for various crimes, and he stood trial. As the trial went along, he protested this, what he called illegal abduction across international borders. And as the trial ended, the judge asked Topo Peters if this story was true. Topo Peters and his defense attorney strongly objected and said yes, and demanded that he be released immediately. The judge looked at the paperwork, looked at Detective Morel again, and then with a strike of the gavel, sentenced him to prison, and also gave Topo some words of advice that next time he should consider getting a better lawyer. Moco laughed about this, but also admitted that if he tried that today, he would be the one in prison. When I finally met Robert Moco Verde Morrill in person, I immediately took a liking to him, and I became a dedicated student protege and loyal friend to this great man. He had a loud and infectious laugh. Even if what he said was not that funny, he would laugh hysterically, and I would laugh also, if not at the corny joke he just told, but because it was funny watching how hard he laughed after telling his story. Like me, I also learned that he had been very hurt on a personal and professional level by many of those in law enforcement who should have been allies, but for whatever reason, jealousy, competition, vindictiveness, etc., and can sometimes be our greatest adversaries. I listened to Morel speak with pride about his work in California as the first coordinator of the Monterey Park Prison Gang Task Force, and how eventually he turned over the reins to Joe Moody of the Department of Justice, since they had the big bucks to fund such a project and the toys to help carry it out, as well as the political support for a growing number of investigations. He also relayed to me how hurt he was about how his reputation had been tarnished after he worked so hard due to individuals who had their own personal agendas after the traffic stop, which I'll describe here shortly. He told me that it almost destroyed him personally. But he picked up the pieces and soon moved to Texas, where he reignited his career and investigated many of the top guys in Texas prison gangs. He even became one of 5 major regional Texas Department of Criminal Justice Security Threat Group coordinators. Later, Morel would introduce me to many of the officers he worked with who investigated Texas gangs with him. Another interesting thing you should know about Moco is he had roles in 3 Hollywood movies. Director Lou Adler produced Cheech and Chong's first movie, Up in Smoke, and he heard about Moco and the prison gang task force, and he requested that he help with security of a Venice house that was finally chosen to be the mock residence of Cheech's East LA home. The 1978 Cheech and Chong cult classic was filmed in the greater Los Angeles area in just over 30 days. Lou Adler also had Moco play the role of the undercover police officer in a brown leather jacket who gazes into Cheech's window just before immigration conducts a raid on his home and deports Cheech's cousins. Fellow prison gang task force member Tony Casas was credited by director Edward James Olmos in 1992 as being an advisor to his film American Me, which was filmed in part at Folsom Prison where I worked, as well as parts of East LA in the Chino Institution for Men. Moco was not credited, but also gave advice. Both Casas and Moco warned Olmos about artistic liberties he had taken with the film, and Laeme was not happy with the movie. As a partial apology for losing many of Moco's rare photos, Olmos sent Moco this giant signed poster, which was pinned up in his living room for many years. Moco also participated in the 1993 film Blood In, Blood Out, as did his old prison gang task force original member Danny Vasquez, who played himself as the warden of San Quentin. Moco told me that he was under the impression that the screenwriter of that film, former New Mexico convict named Jimmy Santiago Baca, based it in part on the life of Moco. Benjamin Bratt's character, the gang member named El Gallo Negro, who joined the military instead of going to prison after a large gang fight and later became a cop, was supposed to represent El Moco Verde. But I guess Baca felt the Green Booger would not be a good name for his main character. When Moco saw the film, he was a bit confused, as the prison gang leader, Miklo, looked more like him. Moco told me he was born in California to a very poor family, and eventually they moved into the Ramona Gardens public housing projects, also known as Hazard. This is a well-known gang area located near East LA, and it has produced several Mexican Mafia members over the years. His father was somewhat abusive and often beat him. As a teen, Morel sought refuge in another project apartment building belonging to the Gomez family, who were related to Raymond German Gomez, one of the original members of the Mexican Mafia. The Gomez family was very large, and they had several children sleeping in one bedroom, but they let Morel sleep on the couch. Being very poor, they had little food, but they fed him rice and beans and took care of him for several weeks. Morel would never forget their kindness and told me it was one of the major reasons why he always had a great fondness for Mexican people. He ended up marrying a Mexican-American woman, and they had several children together. I have communicated with several of them, and I'm still close to his son to this very day. In fact, I recently visited him and got his blessing for this video, so I hope he likes it. Morel became a police cadet in the late 1950s. Then he worked at the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office in the early 60s, where he would encounter individuals like the Sosa family, who were later considered to be major players in a gang that rivaled the Mexican Mafia. This prison gang was made up of individuals who opposed Laeme, and it was called the Nuestra Familia. Morel soon ended up returning to the greater Los Angeles area and was hired on by the Monterey Park Police Department, located near East LA. Unfortunately, in great part due to the fact that he was married to his job, he and his wife divorced. I never met her, but I did meet his second wife, Belia, who is also Mexican-American and also from the LA area. And I understand that she knew several MM members and was an informant for Moco with the code name of Sally. Her first husband was abusive to her, so she left him. She also became employed in the criminal justice system, and they both fell in love while they were both having some very rough times at home. Many years later, Morel actually brought me to the very spot where the following event occurred. One late evening on December 6, 1971, in the city of Monterey Park, there was a murder that occurred of a Mexican Mafia member named Alfonso Apache Alvarez. This homicide would launch several careers and change law enforcement's look on gangs forever. Now, Monterey Park had criminal activity going way back to the 1800s, when a notorious Mexican bandit named Tiburcio Vasquez and his gang of outlaws tortured and beat Alessandro Repetto, a prosperous Italian-American immigrant who owned a 5,000-acre ranch. On April 14, 1874, Vasquez forcibly sent Repetto's nephew to a bank to withdraw the rancher's money. But suspicious bank officials called the sheriff, and the shaken boy told them of the holdup. Meanwhile, Vasquez beat Repetto until he revealed where there were 2 bags containing over $40,000 in gold and silver coins. Although it was not considered an extremely crime-laden city, it did have several prominent members of La Cosa Nostra, crime figures living there, including a member of the New York Gambino crime family living there, Jack Dragna, who was the brother of Louis Dragna. In addition, there were 2 of the biggest con men in the business, Mort and Sweet Lou, who would eventually become informants for Moco. Sweet Lou claimed to be close to Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano, who was a made member of a Cosa Nostra, or Italian-American Mafia. Sweet Lou said he first met the Weasel in Michigan and that he had been driving the very same white over red 1972 Cadillac that ended up in the hands of Mexican Mafia member Joe Colorado Arias. While Colorado was in the free world, the gang task force was told by informants that Jimmy the Weasel gave this Cadillac to Colorado and a pound of heroin. This was in exchange for the Mexican Mafia looking out for him while he was in federal prison. On the Monday morning after the murder of Apache Alvarez, Robert Morrill returned to work as an intelligence officer, Monterey Park PD, and MPPD Lieutenant Bob Collins, who was in charge of the detective section, called Morel into his office. He showed him a picture of the murder victim, who was an Hispanic male, who they did not yet know the name of, and he had been shot 3 times in the head. The murder had all the earmarks of an assassination. They also discovered that the person had a small telephone book on his person, and that some of the names in the book contained the initials EME after them. Lieutenant Collins asked Morel if he had any knowledge of a street gang that used those initials. Morel told him that he did know of one gang that used EMF, and they were called El Monte Flores, a ways to the east from the city of Monterey Park. They both decided that it was not EMF, it was EME. And Collins asked him to check on this further. Morel did some asking around, but could not find out any information. He was about to give up when he thought of one last source he might ask. This individual went by the code name of CIA, who was extremely intelligent and knew all the local players on both sides of the law. Detective Morel met CIA at Gardino's hamburger taco stand, located on the southeast corner of Ford Avenue and Floral Drive, right in the heart of East LA. CIA once described Morel as being like a badger. He would dig and dig and dig until he got to the bottom of things. He also stated that he was very loyal and defended his friends against anyone. He was greatly respected. Even most of the Meros, or Mexican Mafia members, respected him. Bob, as many called him, was a man of great respect. Even the street gangs respected him, so much so that the Rock Maravilla gang, which is one of many gangs located in East LA, once made him an honorary member. Via CIA, it was discovered that the victim, Apache Alvarez, had recently attended a meeting at CIM, the prison in Chino. It also was discovered that Apache had recently opened up a storefront in East LA called Pintos por la Raza, Convicts for the People. Supposedly, Apache told people that he was just selling political banners, revolutionary buttons and posters, and pictures of Chicano protesters and Mexican-American heroes. But in reality, he was also selling drugs out of this place without kicking back to his Mexican Mafia brothers. It was also found that he was extorting other dealers who were protected by the M at a local bar called El Triste Hombre that was located nearby. In addition, it was discovered that he had botched an elaborate plan by Mexican Mafia members to escape during the prison transport. Eventually, it was determined that Apache Alvarez had been killed by 2 Mexican Mafia assassins, Kilroy Roybal and Alpi Sosa. But before this was discovered, Monterey Park Chief of Police Warner suggested that Morel contact one of his captains, John Elder's brother, Don Elder, and explain the murder to him. Elder was a parole agent for the California Department of Corrections, and the chief believed he might have additional information on this prison gang that went by La M. But when Morel asked Elder about it, he was silent. Elder was not known to be short on words, and he could tell by his silence that this was something big. He told Morel that he needed to talk to his supervisors first before he could elaborate, and that he would get back to him soon, one way or the other. The next day, Elder came back with his 2 supervisors, Tony Casas and Danny Vasquez, both of whom I mentioned previously as also having roles in Hollywood prison movies. Elder also stated that he had been in contact with one of the prison investigators at San Quentin by the name of Sergeant William Bill Hankins, who said that he could provide Don with a list of inmates who he believed to be members of La M. Later on, posthumously, there was a book put out by Police and Fire Publishing called Alpha Guard, which describes the life and career of Sergeant Bill Hankins. It was at that time they got the okay to go ahead with the Monterey Park Prison Gang Task Force, which consisted primarily of CDC, Los Angeles Police, and Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, as well as representatives from other agencies. It was agreed that Monterey Park PD would acquire a mobile home to be parked out in back of the police station, and that this would act as a headquarters. This would informally become known as the trailer, and Morel was chosen to be the first coordinator of this prison gang task force. Many suspects of prison gangs were interrogated there, but it was also found out that La M discovered this trailer and that they had rented out a place several blocks away, but had a good view looking down on the trailer. And with binoculars, they would scope out whoever was coming and going, including taking note of who was in handcuffs and who wasn't. I'm pretty sure that some of these individuals ended up later disappearing. Moco told me that one of the things that the Prison Gang Task Force had in their favor was they were very determined and highly motivated to get behind all the murders that had been taking place on the streets. Sergeant Hankins informed them that there were multiple homicides that had been occurring for years inside prisons, but even he had a hard time convincing authorities that La M was a real thing and not just a rumor or a joke. They met frequently, and as the agenda here proves, the task force was already actively engaging in in-depth investigations within a year. While some investigators were assigned to just cover certain groups, all major board members of the Prison Gang Task Force were privy to information sent in from agencies all over the state on all the four major prison gangs: the Mexican Mafia, the Nuestra Familia, the Aryan Brotherhood, and the Black Guerrilla Family. Detective Morel was in charge of all the intelligence files on all these groups and all the documented members of these groups. I could verify that because I've personally seen copies of many of these files. The fateful day was February 20th, 1977. This was basically 6 years after the formation of the Prison Gang Task Force, and a mere 9 days after Morel's 42nd birthday. The day started out somewhat uneventful, but this night would be burned in the mind of Robert until the very day he died. Upon exiting, as he got back in the detective car, he heard over the radio his friend, Officer Joe Delia, making a traffic stop. He knew from previous experience that Joe usually never asked for backup, but in this case, he used the police vernacular code for able. Basically, this meant, please send backup, but it was not an urgent matter. Being the inquisitive person that Morel was, and being that he was only 3 blocks away, he decided to drive over to Officer Delia's location to see what was up. And this is where it gets really messy. You could read more about it in Morel's book, The Traffic Stop. Hindsight is often 20/20 vision. Maybe Moco never should have been involved in the traffic stop in the first place. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. Both officers would regret many things, but they did not regret always trying to serve the public safety of their communities. My good friend, George Chavez, who is a veteran gang detective in the state of Wisconsin and is currently a chaplain, also knew Moco. And the thing he told me he remembers most about Moco was his ability to encourage others in spite of obstacles. He stated that Moco always made it a point to share how important the work of gang investigations were and how important it was to work together, not against each other, as occurred after the traffic stop. I went to visit Moco in Arizona shortly before his death. I could tell his health was already deteriorating, but he still had some good stories to tell. And although he told me many of them several times before, I respectively listened again. Moco and I had a father-son-like relationship about prison gangs and about life. We miss you, Moco. Rest in peace.